Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Danielle, and I'll be your host for today's session. So we are thrilled to have you with us as we dive into the world of data analytics and explore how it can empower organizations to uncover valuable insights and stay ahead of the curve. So here are our presenters. Before we go into our presenters, actually, I would just give you a brief overview of our agenda. So to kick things off, we'll talk about the challenges companies face in managing vast amounts of data and introduce Microsoft Fabric as a solution to overcome these hurdles. Our data team has also prepared a live demo, which will showcase how Microsoft Fabric can help you visualize insights and uncover trends in your data. And now we'll move on to our presenters. First, we have Stefania Peters. He is our data lead and data engineer here at Davyn, and he would guide you through the first portion of our webinar. Next, we have Jade Ganga. She is our data analyst, and she would guide you through our demo. And finally, you have myself, Denise Lawrence. I am the marketing specialist here at Davyn. So before we get into the main event, let me give you a quick intro into Davyn for those of you who are new. So Davin has been around for over 20 years, and we are the largest and most experienced Microsoft Dynamics partner in the territory. Our certifications include Microsoft 365, Azure, Power Platform, and Dynamics 365. We pride ourselves on having local resources and serving over 100 active business clients across the English and Dutch Caribbean region. And now we'll jump into our solution offerings. Our business applications like Power Platform and Dynamics 365 help you manage everything from finance and supply chain to HR and customer management. We offer both ready-made and customized solutions to fit your specific business needs. When it comes to cloud computing, we use Microsoft Azure to help you move your resources to the cloud. This shift enhances security, scalability, and cost efficiency, allowing your IT team to focus more on critical tasks. So for data and analytics, we rely on SQL Server and Microsoft Fabric to help you collect, store, and analyze data. This way, you can uncover hidden trends and make better decisions to drive your business forward. When it comes to productivity and collaboration, we provide tools like Microsoft 365 and Azure DevOps, which improve how your teams communicate and work together. And finally, we have security and compliance. This includes Microsoft Defender and Azure Active Directory to protect your data and ensure you meet all regulatory requirements. So now, without further ado, I'll hand you over to our amazing team. Stefania, he will take the lead and let you know what our webinar is about. So Stefania, when you're ready.
Sure. Pleasant morning, everyone. I trust that everybody can hear me. Right.
Yes,
Can
we
you hear me,
can.
David? All right. Perfect. Wonderful. All right. So to everyone, it is a pleasure to be here to do this session with you all. My together with myself, Daniil is leading this charge in a way that is giving us the ability to move from just talking about Microsoft Fabric to actually showing you all what Fabric can do. So I don't want to kill you all with slides, but do bear with me as we go through these few slides this morning and then get into our demo that our data analyst Jade would do for us. Now we're going to follow a very simple content. Not, as I said, I don't want to bore you with slides. So in the next 30 minutes, you're going to be hearing about what are the common challenges that our customers face. And then we'll do an introduction to Microsoft Fabric slide-wise and then straight into demo. All right. So I will tell everybody, get ready. So what are these challenges that our customers usually face? So in speaking with clients, and we've been speaking to many clients throughout the region, so I'm speaking from a Caribbean region perspective, we found that customers usually have a challenge in getting to put certain strategic decision-making analysis together. One of the main areas for that being that most of their systems are legacy systems, and most people will be aware of that. Another thing that also comes to mind is that we have in the Caribbean area where Excel is a champion. So because Excel is our champion, we have files that exist, be it on a server somewhere, be it on someone's machine. Everything is in silos. It's either belonging to this department or belonging to another department. So the aim would always be to try to get that unified and to integrate. Now, integration comes at a cost. Recently, I came across where someone had did a survey, and I believe it was IDC, that did a survey in 2020 that forecasted that for the next 3 years, there will be more data created than over the past 30 years. And that's 2020. So we are now past that 3 year mark. Therefore, investing in technology, you need to make real-time data-driven decisions without compromising your security or governance is something that's critical to your long-term success. Now, in modernizing this or getting you to this modern state, we have to recognize that to do this, there has to be a coming together of security. There has to be a coming together of someone who understands your data in your business. There must also be a coming together of the data from the various aspects of your business. And Microsoft is positioning a solution, and we're going to get to that solution, that allows you to be able to take all of your different data sources, take all of your different streams of data, bring it together in a in a unified platform where you can then access it according to your role. So if your role within the company is data analyst, you access it, you're able to work on it in that manner. Also, if for example you're the data engineer like myself and your role is just to get that data, blend it in a way that somebody who's the data analyst. Now we live in the Caribbean, and we are familiar that it's usually a one-man show. It's usually IT that's just coming, doing everything. But that data culture is something that has to shift. And if you'd allow me just 1 minute to just take a little stray for one moment. In 2024, as now, I think it would have been probably April or so, Gartner produced an article with regard to chief data and analytics officers. Now, these are roles that sound so big and so fancy. And again, I'm going to say, let's bring it back to the Caribbean. What this role is basically requiring you is to have somebody who understands the technical side and the business side of your business and being able to bridge that gap. That person who's able to talk to your executives, talk to their peers, and talk to users. So it does bring about a culture shift that is going to be, how I say, integral to the growth and the success of any data and analytics solution that you will be going forward with. Now, your question will be, okay, Stefania, what is that solution? And that solution that we're going to be looking at today is called Microsoft Fabric. What is Microsoft Fabric? I don't know if anybody here would have been familiar with Azure Synapse Analytics. I know most people would have heard the term Power BI, and some would have heard the term of Data Factory. Now, each of these solutions in their own right are very good, very powerful. Now, imagine bringing all of these solutions together under one platform where your different roles that I pointed out before are able to benefit from that. So you're able to use the power of Data Factory to get your pipelines. You're able to use the power of Power BI to do your reporting, and you're able to use the power of Synapse to do that area, that middle layer of your data warehousing, your data lake, your real-time analytics. And all of this is sitting on top of what Microsoft is calling their one lake environment. Now, that one lake is the desire for that one lake is to make sure that you have one copy of your data. At no point in time do you want to have an environment where you have different copies for different areas of the business. And that is sitting on top of this SaaS infrastructure. So for those who are familiar with Office 365 or Microsoft 365 now, where you sign in, you're able to access your SharePoint, you're able to access your email, you're able to access different areas of the M365 space according to what subscription you purchase. It's a similar experience. You're going to sign into this one similar platform, which is called the Fabric Workspace Environment. You sign in there, you're able to access Data Factory, Synapse, Power BI, and even Data Activator. And there are other solutions that are going to come into play as Microsoft continues this journey. Now, another thing that this entire infrastructure is built on top of is security. You're dealing with that security that Microsoft has had as their foundation since they first started on this cloud journey many years ago. We also have the strength of the compute and storage from the cloud to fit whatever business model that you have. Now, before I pass over to my colleague Jade, I just want us to note that Fabric is basically an analytical solution for the era of AI. So AI plays an integral role. And when you're going to see the demo, you're going to see certain things like forecasting, trend analysis. These are things that are better enhanced by the AI that's running underneath. And all of that power is coming from the Copilot acceleration that's happening there, as well as the GPTs through Microsoft Open AI solution that they have in the environment. Again, I'm going to say to you all, this is just a really high level view of what you're getting into when you deal with Microsoft Fabric, because Microsoft Fabric is a complete analytical solution and platform. It is lake centric, so you're going to be hearing a lot of open source stuff. Sometimes you might hear about PySpark, you might hear on some of the calls, somebody may tell you about Scala or Java. Those are not to put you off, but it's just to show you that Microsoft is using a solution that's very open. Also, its ability to empower every user, whether it's a high-level user to your deepest developers within your environment, Fabric covers that area. And with that, I'm able to pass over to my colleague Jade, who's then going to take us on a demo experiencing what exactly you can do to drive efficient production and planning for operations.
Okay, thank you, Stefania. So, hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on this morning for our webinar. As you can see on this slide, the whole point of our demo is to show you how you can leverage Fabric to drive efficient production and planning for your business operations. So a bit of background regarding our demo. So the demo will be focused on a company called Megastar Distribution Center, which I may refer to as MSD throughout the demo. But Megastar is basically a fictional business that deals with inventory, warehousing, and sales. The business has locations in 4 Caribbean countries. And as you can see on the title of this slide, we'll be looking at this business's Fabric journey. And what that means is throughout the demo, I will be showing you all the different personas that would have been used to create the report for this business. So specifically, we'll be looking at Data Factory, Synapse Data Engineering, and Power BI personas. And with that, I'm just going to share my screen. So bear with me for just a moment, please. Can you all please confirm that you're seeing my screen and
Yes,
still
ma'am.
hearing me? Okay, great. Thank you, Daniel.
No
So
problem.
here we have our landing page for Microsoft Fabric. So what this shows us is basically we get an idea of the different types of personas that Microsoft Fabric has available to us. As I mentioned before, we'll be looking at 3 specific personas: Data Factory, Power BI, and Synapse Data Engineer. So before I get started, I just want to remind you all, if there's anything that you would like us to review in the demo to go over, or if you'll have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat and we will address them. Or if they require a bit more explanation, we may leave it for the end so that we can address them properly. And with that, I will get into our first persona, which is Data Factory. So just a quick overview of Data Factory. So Data Factory persona allows us to do the backend work for our BI and analytics environment. It basically allows us to build out the environment and the foundation upon which all of your analytics and BI for your business will come from. So here we have all of the objects for our MSD demo. And I'll just give a quick idea or a quick explanation as to what exactly each of these things are. So we have a data flow, which I'll come back to. We have the report, we have a lakehouse, a semantic model, and something called a SQL analytics endpoint. So starting off with the lakehouse. A lakehouse in Microsoft Fabric is basically the area that all our data and all our tables or queries are stored. It's basically home of all of the data that your BI and analytics environment will be used. Getting into the semantic model, some of you may be familiar with it. If not, that's okay. The semantic model is basically the backbone of your report. It allows us to connect all of the data that we'll be using to build out our report. And it allows us to create those relationships between our different data tables to facilitate analysis and getting insights from your data. Next, we have the SQL Analytics endpoint, which sounds complicated, but it's really just a warehouse built upon the lakehouse. And now you're probably wondering, what do we need a warehouse for if we already have a lakehouse? So the warehouse is there to allow analysts and authorized users to query the data that we have stored in that lakehouse. And this allows us to make further transformations, add DAX measures, which are basically custom formulae that you may need to use to get your insights. So it could be something that is specific to how your business operates. It could be a calculation that is specific to your business. And all of this is just allowing us to do these things without actually interfering or changing the data that we have in the lakehouse. And last but not least, we have our data flow. So the data flow is basically the tool that would have been used to bring in all of our data. So it's an ingestion tool that allowed us to bring in the data that we would use for the demo. So here we have the data flow environment. And for those of you who are familiar with Power BI desktop and have worked with it, you'll realize that this view looks just like Power Query. In fact, it's actually called Power Query. So at the top here, you'll see your usual transformation options, be it that you want to choose columns, remove columns, keep rows, combine tables, etc. On the left side of the screen, we have the queries pane, which shows all of the tables that we will have in our lakehouse. So this would be the 7 tables that we have brought into the MSD lakehouse. On the right side, we have our query settings pane, and this allows us to see all the transformations we have made under the applied step section. And we can also edit the name of the table simply by clicking in this little namespace here. And we can edit the name to be whatever we need the table to be called. So when you have completed bringing in your data, which, by the way, you just need to use the get data option here. So when you click on that, you'll see new source, Excel workbook, data flows, SQL Server database. I'm sure these are all things you are familiar with. And if you are seeing something there that you are not seeing something that you use, more than likely it's under the more section because there are so many things that you can connect to with Microsoft Fabric. And this recent source would be where I brought in our MSD data from. So just a bit of background on that, our MSD data would have come from an Excel workbook, and we would have just loaded in the tables that we needed from that workbook. So once you're finished with your transformations and loading your tables, you want to hit publish at the bottom here. And when you hit publish, you'll notice that our data flow now has an icon spinning next to it. And what that's basically telling us is that the data flow is being published with the changes. Once that's been completed, it will now need to refresh. And that refresh allows all of the objects in the environment to be synced with the changes, or at least all of the objects that are linked to that data flow. So if you brought in a new table, once the data flow is published and refreshed, you should see it appearing in your lakehouse without needing to do any refreshing of your own. So with that being said, that would be the end of our data factory persona. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. And if not, I'll move into our data engineering persona next. I take it there are no questions. So moving into the data engineering persona, what we have here is the persona that allows us to do data wrangling, which is not as complicated as it sounds. Data wrangling is basically where you transform your data further. So the data engineering persona allows us to do further transformations on our data as needed for our business's specific BI or analytics requirements. That being said, the view that we have right now is looking at the lakehouse. And what we have here is a data preview. Note that it's limited to show only 1,000 rows. So if I were to choose the inventory table, you'll notice that it only shows 1,000 rows. But again, this is a limited preview. At the top of this view, in this ribbon-like section, you'll notice we have something that says open notebook. So if you were to open a notebook, you can open an existing notebook or a new notebook. And the notebook is really a space for you to write code to do further transformations. So as my colleague Stefania would have mentioned, PySpark is an example of something that you can use your notebook to leverage. So let's say you have orders data, but it's saved in such a way that each year is a separate table. You can use PySpark in that notebook to write the code that combines these several tables of data into a single table. And with that, you'll be able to create a simpler semantic model that doesn't need to use as much resources. The load would be lighter since you're only loading one table versus several tables with thousands of rows of data. Additionally, aside from making the load smaller, it will also help to improve the performance of your report. Next to that, we have the option to create a new semantic model. So our Lakehouse has a default semantic model that uses all of these tables, which we'll look at a bit later. But the new semantic model option allows you to create a semantic model specific to what you'd like to build out in a report. So for example, if you wanted to build a report that was specific to inventory and managers, you can create a custom semantic model that just uses the tables that you need, which, as I mentioned before, will help to reduce the load on that semantic model and further improve the performance of your report. Last but not least, we have the get data option. And what this allows you to do is you can create new data pipelines or new data flows or even upload new files. But I just want to point out that you don't necessarily have to create a new data flow or pipeline every time you need to bring in new data. So if we wanted to bring in a table with delivery information, for example, for MST, what we could do is we can go back to that data factory persona and we can select our data flow, use the get data option in there to bring in that table of delivery data, make our transformations and just hit publish. Once we hit publish and allow the data flow to be completely published and refreshed, you should be able to come back into this persona or into your lakehouse and you should see that new table appearing under this section. Are there any questions regarding this view of the persona right now? If not, then I'll move on to the SQL endpoint. So our SQL analytics endpoint, as I mentioned before, allows us to do a lot more transformations and a lot more work towards our report. So right now you can see my semantic model for our MSD report. For those of you who are familiar with building semantic models, you'll realize that this is a bit of a snowflake. If you don't know what that means, that's okay as well. But basically what happened here is we have 3 tables: warehouse productivity, orders, and inventory, that contain so much data that they themselves can result in an individual report. So for the purposes of the demo, I wanted to use all of these tables so we can at least have a high level view of the insights you can get from these different areas. So with that, I also wanted to point out that in this space, we can adjust data types. So I'm just going to zoom in and I'm going to go to the unit cost of products table. So let's say we wanted to change the data type of unit cost. All we need to do is select the unit cost field in the products table. And in our properties pane, you'll see that you have the name of the column. You have a few other bits and pieces there. But for the purposes of changing the data type, we want to look at the formatting section. And here we could change the format from whole number to general, currency, decimal number, whatever you'd like. So if I simply click currency, you'll notice the fabric icon. So that means that everything was being synced and saved. And just like that, we changed the data type for unit cost to currency. I'm just going to change that back to whole number. So at the top of this screen, we have another ribbon that has the new report and new measure options. I'll touch on the new visual query and new SQL query options a bit later. So the new report option allows us to basically go into that Power BI persona and build out our reports. But we'll get into the Power BI persona specifically in a little bit. I want to touch on the new measure option. So remember I mentioned using DAX measures to create those custom formulae that you may need for your business specifically. So when I click on new measure, what's going to happen is a formula bar is supposed to appear, but right now Fabric is taking a bit to load. But basically a formula bar will appear kind of like in Excel for those of you who work with Excel. And in there, you will type out your formula and there's usually a little check mark next to it on the right side. So you'll just hit that and once your measure doesn't have any errors, it will automatically save to the environment for you to use later on. Are there any questions regarding the model view within the SQL Analytics endpoint?
Hi, Jade, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So we didn't have any questions regarding that, but there was a question with regard to PySpark and how it's actually how it's written. If it's PIESPRK, and I did put in the chat that is actually PySpark, which is Python for Apache Spark in Microsoft Fabric. So I also included a link as
Okay.
well. All right.
No problem. Thank you for addressing that question.
No problem.
Okay, so in the queries view, we have what is basically a script. So for those of you who are familiar with working with SQL, this is the area where you can write your SQL queries against the various tables that you have in your lakehouse. So our data previews are limited to 1,000 rows. So let's say for some reason you wanted to see all of the data that you have in a table that has like 10,000 rows. You could come into SQL and you could write the SQL code, select star from whichever table. And once you run that, you should get the results returning all of the rows of data that you have in that table. For a bit more advanced querying, you can run a query on your table that you may need to use in your reporting. And what you can do is you can simply hit save as a view and then add that view into your semantic model and just build out your report from there. So we have the new visual query option. And what that allows you to do is, for those of you who aren't as comfortable writing SQL code, it allows users to not have to write code to query a table. What it gives you is a graphical user interface that allows you to basically click and drag and drop to simulate your query without having to write any code. You have the option to also add the results of that visual query to your semantic model as a view. So it's very friendly to users who aren't per se SQL experts. If that's something you're interested in seeing, please let us know and we'll try to demo that as well. So last but not least, in the data engineering persona, I have the data view, which basically is another preview of your data in the lakehouse. And coming back to Power BI Desktop, this is pretty much similar to the table or data view that allows you to preview what your table of data contains. So if there are no questions, we'll move on to the last part of our demo, which is the Power BI persona. So the Power BI persona is where your data analysts or report creators will really work in. And this is where you build out the report. So I already have Megastar's report built out. So this is our landing page or home page with these arrows being page navigators. So getting straight into it, we'll start with the inventory analysis page. So you notice my report would have been a bit blank there. That's just accommodating for the loading time of the data. So each time you open your report, it will refresh so that it tries to give you the most recent data contained in your lakehouse. So looking at this page, we have something like a ribbon at the top here that gives you a quick view of KPIs or key performance indicators of your business. So what we can see is the total amount of products that would have been restocked. We can see the number of times that things would have been restocked, the number of brands, products, and categories that are housed in the inventory, and the last inventory restock date. So right now, my report is filtered to 2022, which is why the last restock date would have been the 31st of December. So getting into that, I just want to go back up to the overview, which would show us all of the data we have in the lakehouse to yesterday. So first visual we have on the left side of the screen is a pie chart showing the inventory turnover ratio by country. So across the 4 years of this company existing, we can see that Dominica would have had the highest turnover rate. We can also see that Bahamas is doing pretty well. And looking to the right side of that, we have inventory and order quantity by month. So this shows us how much inventory we had versus the amount that would have been ordered. And what we can see just at a high level glance is that the company may need to make some adjustments so that they don't have less inventory than what is ordered. Because the trend that we are seeing is that typically across the 4 years, the company tends to have less than what is ordered in stock. Moving to the visual at the bottom, what we have is the average restock quantity by year. And this will be across the 4 years of the company being in existence. You'll also notice there's an orange line running across the graph. And what that is a trend line. And that shows us that despite seeing an increase in the amount of products that would have been restocked in 2022 and 2023, the overall trend is that there's a decrease in the amount of products being restocked by year. So maybe that's something that management needs to look into. We also have the ability to drill down into this visual. So let's say you wanted to dig a bit deeper into 2022. If I turn on this drill down option, and I click the data point for 2022, you'll notice the entire report has changed, and this visual has now expanded to show us the distribution of restock quantity across the months of the year. I would like to show you all an additional page that's not in our page navigator, and it's a really cool feature called Drill Through. So if I were to choose Aruba and hover over Aruba in the pie chart, you'll see a drill through option. And when I go there, I can go to something called country analysis. In country analysis, what we can see is basically a breakdown of the performance of the business in Aruba for the year 2022. So right now we have a particular warehouse selected. So right now we're looking at warehouse 27. And what that has done is that has filtered our page further, and it allows us to see who the manager of that warehouse is, as well as the KPIs at the top that allow us to see how many warehouses we're looking at, the total amount of orders that would have been facilitated by that warehouse, as well as the revenue generated, total products sold, etc. So looking at the line charts, we have revenue by month. So we can see a nice breakdown of how the warehouse would have performed over the various months of 2022. There's also an orange line here, which this time is not a trend line. It's showing you the average revenue that this warehouse would have generated for the year 2022. On average, we can see that the warehouse would have generated roughly $407,000 per month. And I just want to mention that the trend line and the average line, as well as something called forecasting, which we'll get into a bit later, all of these things are just capabilities in Power BI, and it uses AI to generate the information. We don't actually have to go do any intense calculations to get this insight. All we need to do is turn on the capability, really. So looking to the bottom left of the report, we have the quantity of picked and packed items by shift. So what we can see is generally, first of all, the morning shift tends to be the most productive. Second of all, we can see that typically it seems to be about the same level of productivity in terms of packed and picked items. Then we have the quantity restocked by product category, which is on the right side of the report screen. And what this shows us is at first, we can see that printers, S Pens, and laptops tend to be the most restocked product category. So from that, we can infer that maybe those product categories tend to generate the most revenue, or we tend to have orders for those types of products the most, at least for Warehouse 27. If you wanted to just see an overview of the entire of Aruba, we could just clear that slicer, and then you will see a breakdown of, I'm so sorry if you all are hearing my background noise. I
No,
apologize.
you're all good, actually.
Okay, great. Thank you. So for Aruba, we have a breakdown of all of the managers, and we have a breakdown of, again, the revenue by month across the entire of Aruba. So for all of those warehouses, we are seeing how the revenue would have been generated. And you'll notice that my average line, the value has changed. So now we are seeing that on average in Aruba, we would have a revenue of 1.2 million per month on average. Then if we look at the bottom again at the quantity of picked and packed items by shift, we are seeing, again, the morning shift tends to be the most productive. Interestingly, though, we are seeing that except for the evening shift, except for the evening shift, the packed items tends to be more than the picked items. So that might be something that needs to be addressed in order to improve performance, or in order to address some other issue within how those shifts are run. Again, if we look to the right, we have the quantity restocked by product category. And now this is showing us a different thing. We are seeing that tables, cabinets, and printers are now the most restocked in Aruba for the year 2022. So from that, we can infer that most of the revenue generated in Aruba for 2022 would have come from products in those three categories. Are there any questions regarding this page or anything anybody wants me to run over? Okay, I will go back to our inventory analysis page then. And from here, we'll move on to our warehouse analysis page. So our warehouse analysis page, once again, gives us a quick oversight as to what exactly is going on in the warehouses. Right now, my page is showing us Bahamas and the warehouse 22. So I just want to point out something. Right now, since Bahamas is selected, our warehouse options would simply be the warehouses in Bahamas. So if I were to deselect warehouse 22, you'll notice that the total number of warehouses changes. And what this is telling us now is that Bahamas has a total of 23 warehouses. If I were to choose a different country, like let's say Cuba, then we'll see again that the total warehouses changes. So we're now seeing that Cuba has a total of 32 warehouses. So right now, we can see that in Cuba, we have a late delivery rate of 34.7%. Our target is 10%. So clearly, the delivery rate needs to be addressed. Our early delivery rate is 33%, and we wanted a target of 5%. Now, you might be wondering, well, why is it set so low? So I'll just give you a quick scenario. If a company or a client were to order 200 workstation desks from us, and we show up early with that order, if that client is not able to store those 200 desks, we run the risk of the client canceling the order, which in turn causes a loss to the business, and you don't want that. So you want to try to, yes, it's good to deliver early sometimes, but you want to limit that and you want to go for on-time delivery. So you can see the target for on-time delivery is 80%. We are at 32.4%, so what needs to be done? This just gives us a quick oversight. So we already know from this report that management needs to look at improving the delivery rate of the business. To the bottom of that visual, we have the number of orders by year and order status. So what we're seeing is that in 2020, the majority of orders would have been late, but still the majority would have been early. I bad, 46 orders were early. As we go across the years, we tend to see that it varies. There's a large amount that's still late due, which is not good. And then will fall into the things that management needs to address. To the right of this report page, we have at the top right, the pick rate and pack rate by year. So this shows us basically the efficiency of pick rate of picking versus packing. And for all of the years, except 2020, our pick rate seems to be lower versus the pack rate. But again, this just brings us to the point that this is something that management will need to address, be it in the way that shifts are run or in the way that managers are operating their warehouses. Something might need to change. At the bottom of that, we have a donut chart that shows us the number of shifts run by the type of shift. And we can see that we have more morning shifts run than anything else, and night shifts are in the minority. So that could be because the business tends to use night shifts only when they have like rush orders or something like that. Management or the person that's managing the warehouse would be able to account for that. If there are no other questions or there are no questions on this page, I'd like to go into the manager's performance page. So the manager's performance page basically allows us to see how a manager is doing within the business, how they would have contributed, etc. So right now we're looking at Alex. Alex is assigned to Cuba. he manages one warehouse. That one warehouse has a turnover ratio of 1.37. And in the entire time that Alex has been running that warehouse for the year 2020, so I expanded the filters pane and we can see the year selected is 2020. So for the entire year of 2020, Alex would have had 13 orders, and off of those 13 orders, he would have generated 4 million in revenue. Again, if that seems a little bit out there, I just want to reiterate the data set is fictional. So looking at the delivery rate by number of orders, which is the visual on the left top of the page, we can see that in February 2020, he would have had 3 orders. Of those 3 orders, we're seeing that the majority of it would have been late and the minority would have been early. Then we're seeing in April, he had 1 order and that order was early. So this can help management level or even the manager figure out where he needs to improve or what needs to be done to help bring those numbers to a better state. In terms of order quantity by status, which is to the right of that visual, we're seeing that the majority of his orders tends to be late, but a good amount is still early. Ideally, he would want his orders to be on time. So that's something he needs to work on. Then we can see at the bottom, the packed items and picked items by month. So we're seeing that in February, he had more items picked. And then in March, he had more items packed. So if he wants, and then in August, he managed to come really close to having an equal pick and pack rate, basically. So if we wanted to look at his performance over the entire time that he has been with MSD, all we need to do is clear this year filter and we'll be able to see his performance across all of the years that he's been. And this revenue generated is how much he would have generated to date, basically. If there are no questions, we can move into the last page of our demo report, which is a sales analysis page. Okay, moving into sales then. Our sales analysis page shows us, again, KPIs at the top. We have 3 visuals. And you'll notice here I have some buttons. So right now we are looking at a map that shows the revenue by country. And just at a glance, we can see that Cuba would have generated the most revenue. And this is across the entire time that the business would have been in operations. And that's followed by Bahamas. If I were to click orders by year, you'll see that the visual changes. And we now see the number of orders per year since operating. And what we're seeing on this graph is another orange line that shows us a trend. And what we're seeing is a trend that's showing that orders have decreased over time. Again, 2024 may not be the best reference point since our data is incomplete. But looking at the past years, we're seeing a decrease. So that's something that the business would definitely want to address, be it that they need to do more marketing or they need to start reaching out. The business would like to know that their orders have decreased and it's something they need to work on. At the bottom, we have a line chart. Now, remember I told you we only have data up until yesterday. So how do we have data for 2028? Well, the reason we have data is because this line chart is showing us a forecast. So again, this is not something that we needed to do a bunch of difficult calculations or anything like that for. All we needed to do was turn on the capabilities and give it some additional parameters. So looking at this forecast, we can see that Power BI is telling us that it expects that in 2026, the company will make 49 million. However, it's also telling us that I am saying 49, but bear in mind that it could be as low as 37 million or as high as 62 million. And this information will be really helpful to our business because we're seeing a sort of downward trend in this forecast. So ultimately, the business will want that to increase so that we can get more revenue. At the top of this page, on the left side, sorry, we have something called product order details. And product order details is showing us basically all the different categories of products and the amount that would have been sold. And it's broken down in such a way that it's the most products that would have been sold are the biggest rectangles. So if we were to turn on drill down, we can click on tables and we can see the different brands that are available or that are sold. And we can also see the amount of products that would have been sold under each brand. If we were to select Trauma, we can see that they would have sold 7,000 adjustable white tables under that brand. So I'm just going to drill back up. And there's one more thing I want to touch on before we wrap up the demo. So I switched back to our country visual, and I just want to click on Cuba by selecting the bubble. And you'll notice the entire page changed. But what I want to focus on is our forecast. So our revenue by year has changed, and now the forecast is showing us the revenue expected to be generated in Cuba. So we're seeing that in 2026, Colombia expects 40 million to be generated. We have an upper bound of 51 million and a lower bound of 29. So this works for any country that you select, which would be great in terms of planning. If the business were to want to expand, it would be nice to know where is expected to generate the most revenue if you want to expand the business in that area. So with that, that would bring me to the end of the demo. If anybody has any questions, please feel
Jade, we
free
have
to
a
ask.
request.
Sure.
So Mark asks if you can show visual query.
Okay. All right. Let me just
Okay,
go
and he's
back.
also asking, where did you set up or enter the parameters to enable the extrapolations to take place? I guess that's with regard to the forecast, most likely.
Yeah.
So I guess you
most
can show that first scene that you're already here.
Okay, sure, no problem. So I'm gonna click on the edit option here. And what that allows us to do is we can now adjust all of the visuals on this page. So I'm gonna select the visual that has the forecast on it. And you'll notice my visualizations pane. To the extreme end of that pane, you see this magnifying glass icon. So this allows us to have all of these additional insights that, as we refer to them, could be hidden. So right now I have forecast turned on. So in here, you have the option to adjust your confidence interval. You could adjust the forecast length in terms of years. So we are looking at a 5-year period. You could look at a 10-year period if you'd like. And the seasonality points, you can adjust that as well. So these are pretty much the only things that we needed to adjust or interfere with in order to get that forecast information. Does that help, Mark? Mark? Ah, okay, great. No problem. And I just want to go back to show you is it the visual query? Yes, visual query. Okay,
Visual query.
so we're going to come back to the data engineering persona, and we're going to go into new visual queries. So from here, what we're going to do is, let's say we wanted to add the orders table. What I can do is simply drag that onto the canvas. It may take a bit to load. Okay. And here you have that table selected. So if you wanted to reduce rows, okay, I need to give it a minute. Taking a bit longer than a minute. Maybe I need to okay, there we go. Okay, so you see at the bottom, we have a preview of the data that we have in here. This is not limited, by the way. So we'll see everything that we have in this table. If you wanted to, let's say, reduce the number of rows and you wanted to see duplicate values, all you need to do is make sure that this table is selected, which you'll know by the blue highlight. And you can come into reduce rows and you could choose keep duplicates. And this is really helpful because now you'd be able to tell if there's duplicates in your data. Our table has no rows, which means there are no duplicates. So I can also delete that step. And is there anything in particular you wanted to see in here, Mark? Or did you just want to see what the environment looks like? Oh,
You said you can't unmute. All right, understood,
okay.
Mark. But if there's anything specific you wanted to put, you can type it in. If not, this is a really high level view as to what you can do with visual queries. I'll also drop, just like I've been doing before, where I've been placing links. I'll drop links in the chat with regard to visual queries in Microsoft Fabric.
Also, not to jump ahead, but Danielle had something special at the end of the demo that may help. So you might be interested in one of those things that she's going to present, and that might help us to show you in greater detail what exactly you can do with the visual queries. So if there are no more questions, I would just like to say thank you, everybody, for your time, and thank you for the questions. Oh, if they wanted to build a customer ad based upon existing data. Daniel, 1 second. Stephania, I'm not sure if you're seeing Mark's question or his follow-up.
Yeah, I'm seeing it. Looking at this.
Do if they want to build a customer ad hoc based upon existing.
Okay, so in that regard, then Mark, no, I have to answer this question a little cagely because I have to make sure I know what the data source is. But depending on where your data is coming from, you would be able to do certain adjustments. Now, there's one thing that comes into play when you do visual queries, which is something called query folding. I don't have the time to go into that, but query folding is very important with regard to what transformations you do on that query. Because if you make a transformation that's unable to fold, you get a notification and it hampers what you do further down with whatever that data is supposed to be doing. If it's working within a notebook, to do additional transformations, it may work well. But if it's going over into your data model to work in a Power BI report, you may have some challenges there. So this entire Synapse engineering experience or persona within Fabric has its own session in itself, you can say. So you can go deeper there, but I will share some links with regard to Visual Query Editor in Fabric that you can even try to test on your own.
Mhm. And with that, I guess that will bring our demo to an end. So thank you everybody for your time and attention. I will hand you all back over to Danielle now.
Thank you so much, Jade and Stefania. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So I always love doing webinars with our data team because they find the most interesting features of Fabric to highlight. So if you guys like what you've seen here, of course, we're going to send a recording to everyone, but we also have a few of our older webinars on our website that you could take a look. So you can check out our data webinars there. Also, we have some exciting news for you guys. I know you would have seen our demo and been amazed with what Fabric can do, but you're probably also thinking, what can I do for my company? Well, we want to give you a snapshot of that. So, our data team will give you a free analysis. We will take a small subset of your data and show you what Fabric can do with it. So, all you have to do is scan the QR code and just let us know what date and time works well for you. And our data team would reach out and begin your free analysis. Can we move on to the next slide? Great. And we also want to introduce our data analytics courses. Now, this is mainly for people who are interested in, finding out how Fabric and Power BI could work for your company. So if you want to get a deeper understanding of data analytics and how you can use it to uncover hidden trends in your data, this course will definitely be something that you could look into. So you can scan our QR code. It will take you to our website where we'll provide a bit more information on our data analytics courses. Our next intake begins on July 22nd. So you can head on over to our website and you'll be able to register there. And that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I know you are amazed of the capabilities of Power BI and Microsoft Fabric. If you guys have any questions or concerns, or if you would like to book a consult, you could feel free to reach out to myself or your AE or anyone from our Davyn team, and we would be happy to help. So, again, thank you everyone for joining us today. You guys have a great week ahead and stay safe.